Hey everyone, welcome back to Breakthrough Innovation, where we uncover what it really takes to lead change, create value, and build what's next. I'm JL Heather, one of the co founders at Centered, which is a firm that helps organizations navigate complexity, spark creativity, and unlock the full potential of their teams through innovation, coaching, and strategy. Now, most executives can articulate their strategy, but I think very few can actually make someone feel it. So, in a world where attention is the scarcest resource in any room, the leaders that win aren't always the one with the best ideas. They're the ones who can make those ideas land. My guest today has delivered over 3,500 keynotes worldwide and has spent his career at the intersection of communication, leadership, and business growth. Dr. Danny Brassell, author of 21 books and co-founder of WellCrafted Story, doesn't just teach people how to speak. He teaches leaders how to convert a story into a strategy and a stage into a pipeline. Today, you'll walk away with a concrete framework for turning the way you communicate into one of your most powerful competitive advantages. Danny, welcome to the show. I'm eager to dive in.
Me too. Thanks so much for that kind introduction, Jay. I'm bringing you on the road with me. I appreciate you.
I love it. We do our best. I'm glad you like it. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now because I think when we work with senior leadership, I don't know that I've ever worked with an executive that came out and said, I'm not a good communicator. I think they all believe they're pretty strong communicators. And oftentimes, I think their teams might disagree with them. I don't know. I'm curious, though, from your perspective, where's the gap and why does it persist at the executive level so much?
Well, the biggest mistake I see that most executives make is they are always bragging. And that's probably the most helpful strategy I can share with people is stop sharing your successes and start sharing your failures because not everybody in the room has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you share your own failures, the more your audience is going to see themselves in you. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do in any presentation is to connect with your audience.
Yeah, and I think, is it Brene Brown's research where she talks about people who are willing to own their mistakes and work through them are perceived as more trustworthy. Uh, they're more, they have more authority, like influence. I think it's Brene Brown. So I love that perception. Why do you think they don't realize the gap? Maybe that's the better question. What is it that about being an executive or getting to that role that maybe makes them blind to the lack?
I always say that there's two ways you get better at presenting. First of all, one of my coaches was a guy named Jim Rohn, and Jim used to say, you can't pay other people to do your push ups. Translation, you got to do the reps. So you got to get out there and speak. And
Yeah.
second of all, you got to watch other speakers. I watch 10 speakers a day. I watch politicians. I
Mm.
watch comedians. I watch televangelists. I watch them in front of big groups, in front of small groups. And, so if you're going to watch a president of the United States, when I work with politicians, I always joke with them. I'm like, you ever notice that nobody running for president ever grew up middle class? And the reason is they all had to grow up in a log cabin because they have to show that struggle to relate to their audience. I think right now I'm working with a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He's 35 years old. Now, think about that. He's 35 years old, and his board of directors are all gray-haired people in their 50s and 60s. And so what
Right.
we had to do to help him relate to that board of directors was to talk about all the menial jobs he had to do in order to rise so quickly as a CEO of 35. And by doing that, he was showing the board, hey, I don't know everything. You know a lot. We can all work on this together to make this company even better. And that's how he was able to really build that trust immediately with his board of directors.
No, I like that. You're creating the human connection. You're showing that you belong to their group to some extent. Is that a good way to say it?
Absolutely. I like that.
And so, like, that's a great way to connect. It's a great way to start telling the story. I know at Centered, we deal a lot in the innovation space,
Mhm.
and it's really common to have great storytellers in the innovation space, but that doesn't necessarily mean that anything moves.
Mhm.
So, how do you take, like, once you've made that connection, once you've kind of set the stage, how do you then take whatever that idea is, whatever it is you're communicating on, and turn that into action rather than just talk?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jail. I mean, that's what I always distinguish the difference between a good speaker and an excellent speaker. Good speakers tell stories. Excellent speakers tell stories that actually move the needle, that there's an intention there. And so, for example, we're working with a nutrition expert right now, and her call to action is she wants people to enroll in her 90-day program for 1997, and she was ending her presentation there. I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! You're making a big mistake. If you're ending with your call to action, you're ignoring potentially 50% of your audience." Because I say that there's two types of people in the audience. I'm going to be stereotypical and say it's the husband and the wife. The husband, I call Joe Friday. Joe Friday's sitting there with his arms crossed, looking skeptically the entire talk, like, who is this person? What are they trying to sell me? What do I got to do? How much it's going to cost? And a very thorough, well-crafted story is going to make sure to address the concerns that Joe Friday has. But if you end with Joe Friday, you're ignoring the wife, Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts, she doesn't care how much it costs. She just wants to feel good. I listen to JL's podcast because it makes me feel good. I learn every time I listen to JL's podcast. And so Dr. Kathy was making a big mistake. And so I asked, well, what do you want your audience to ultimately understand? She's like, I want them to understand they can't do this diet on their own. I'm like, oh, you need to hire an expert story. She's like, what's that? I'll give you an example. I'll leave you all today with this. Many years ago, my wife and I, we had theater tickets. We were dressed to the nines, driving to the theater when we got a flat tire. And my wife said, well, I'll call AAA and get a tow truck. And I looked at her. I'm like, you don't have to call AAA. I'm a man. I can fix a flat tire. So I got out of the car and I opened up the trunk and I got the spare tire, and then I got the pumper thing and I got the big like jack thingy, and I started trying to take off the nuts off the tire. And 27 minutes later, I had grease all over my hands. I hadn't fixed the flat tire. I look up, my wife is standing, shaking her head with her arms crossed, with an expression like, I could have done so much better than this guy. Well, unbeknownst to me, she had actually called AAA 27 minutes earlier, and this tow truck shows up. And this 17-year-old punk kid hops out and proceeds to fix my flat tire in 3 minutes flat. You know, I think there are times in life when all of us think we can do it on our own, but if you want to save time, you want to save money, you want to save a whole lot of headache and embarrassment, you hire an expert. So what I've done is I've taken a story and with an intention, it's a metaphor to show the audience at the end of the presentation, I've tried lots of diets in the past. Maybe I should have tried Dr. Kathy because she can guide me. She's the expert. That's the perfect. That's the difference that I see. A lot of people will give like an anecdote, but it has nothing to do with anything. Like, we want a story that actually moves people closer to whatever you want them to do, and that's the only way I judge our effectiveness. When people tell me, "Hey, Danny, I got a standing ovation," I'm like, "Good for you." Or people say, "Hey, they think I'm a great speaker now." I'm like, "That's wonderful." The only way I measure our effectiveness is how many people in your audience decided to take the next step with you. Now, that can be an unpaid next step, like subscribe to my podcast or vote for me.
I do.
More typically with my clients, it's a paid next step, like buy my product or invest in my coaching program. We want to know our numbers and how many people are actually taking that next step at the end of your presentation.
Mm. I love that for a couple of reasons. I think so often in our business, we see people who have metrics that measure motion rather than progress, or distance, maybe is a better way to say it. So I know one of our lines a lot of times is, don't measure the steps, measure the distance. And that's what I hear you saying. It is truly understand what the value is you're trying to create and measure that. The number of claps you got doesn't matter if no one bought. If you got 0 claps and 100 people bought, you were wildly successful. If you got if you got 100 claps and no one bought, you were not successful at all. I think that maybe that's probably one thing that a lot of people lose sight on, is that difference between motion and progress.
I love the way you said that. I love measuring steps, measuring distance, not the steps. I mean, yeah, we want to move parts, but more importantly, we want to move the needle.
I wonder, the examples you're giving are selling a product, selling a service right now. How does that change when it's selling a change initiative inside an organization? How does it change in front of a board? How does it change in front of executives?
Yeah, so right now we're working with, by the way, I have two co-founders, Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson and Dave Ward. I call us the professor, the performer, and the producer, because my background is academia. Coach Jimmy was a Broadway actor, and Dave was an attorney. So I always believe in discretion, so I never give you the names of any of our clients. All you have to do is talk to Coach Jimmy. He'll name drop every single person we work with. But, right now we're working with a Silicon Valley firm, and it's engineers, and they're going through a round of raising capital with some venture capitalists, or as they like to call them, vulture capitalists. And so, um,
I've heard that before.
yeah, so so I'm working with a bunch of engineers, and let's just say engineers are a little bit introverted, and they have a difficult time connecting with their audience. And so I'm working with a wonderful gentleman right now. He's an Indian guy, and he came up to me. He's like, "Danny, please, please, you have to help me. You got to make me funny so that they'll give us money." And so all we did, so he has a 12-minute presentation that he's put together because he's got this incredible technology, but they weren't making the sale. And so all I did to get him to connect with his audience is he has a very difficult name to pronounce. And so now he starts off his presentation. He says, "Hello, my name is Shubhankar Majahardin. Gee, I sure hope I'm pronouncing that correctly." And what's that's doing is it's just getting all of it's taking everybody off guard, and they're like, "Oh, this guy doesn't take himself so seriously." And now that
Right.
you connect, that's why I love humor. I'm a researcher, and so I'm going to give you some really important research. It was from the movie Monsters Inc. Monsters Inc. proved that laughter is more powerful than fear. I see a lot of people use the fear tactic all the time, but I'm a big believer in positivity and getting people to laugh. I think it's a much more effective way to connect with an audience. Because I learned long ago, I take my job seriously. I don't take myself too seriously because I
Right.
ain't all that, and neither are you, Jail. And if you think you're all that, just teach kindergarten for a week. Those little ones will set you. I had a little girl once, LaShonda, raise her hand. She's like, "Mr. Sal, when are you going to trim your nose hair?" I'm like, "This afternoon." Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I,
At the
I
next
ain't all
possible
that.
moment. No, I have 2 kids. My ego is in check, trust me.
There you go.
One of
Perfect.
them's a teenager, so it takes a daily battering. It's great. No, I love that. I love the laughter. I think, it all fits into a good narrative about storytelling, and I think what you were telling me before is you have the well-crafted story system. So maybe, I mean, I feel like we've been talking around it, so maybe it's time, like, break it down for us. What is that well-crafted story system?
Yeah, so I call it a well-crafted story. Politicians would call it a stump speech. I've heard people call it a signature talk. You can call it peanut butter and jelly. It doesn't matter. This is a presentation you're going to deliver again and again to introduce yourself to new audiences. It's going to be flexible enough that you can deliver it one to many, one to few, one to one. You can do it in person or virtually. You can deliver it to a ballroom, a boardroom, a classroom, a courtroom. Heck, one of our clients once delivered it in a restroom, and hopefully his call to action is wash your hands or whatever. But this is going to be ingrained in your brain like the Lord's Prayer, the Pledge of Allegiance. It's going to become so natural that you're going to be comfortable delivering it without any problem. And so you have to forgive me. I'm a former teacher. Everything I do either rhymes or it's alliterative. And so we call it the 5 C's approach. And so before we put together any of the presentation, the first C is clarity. There are 2 questions I ask every client before we work with them. Who is your audience and what is the problem that you solve? Now, those sound like very basic questions, but you'd be amazed. 95% of the people I work with, JL, cannot answer one or both of those questions in a succinct manner. Now, once we get very clear on the answers to those questions, then we can get into the presentation. The next 4 C's are: you have to connect with your audience, you have to teach meaningful content that serves your audience, you have to have one clear call to action, and then you have to have the emotional close. And so, connect. I always tell people in the first 5 minutes of your talk, you got to rap. You got to show you're relatable. You have to demonstrate your authority, and you have to share your purpose. So, relatable. Man, I am just like you. I've had that exact same problem. Authority, and I solved that problem. Purpose. And now I'm on a mission to help people just like you so you don't have to suffer the way I suffered. If you can do that in the first 5 minutes, now you've built trust with your audience. You're going to increase that conversion rate. Once we get into content, um, again, I look at research. It's fascinating. The content portion of most presentations is what most people focus on. It's the largest part of your presentation, and research shows it's the least important. People remember the bun, not the burger. They remember the
Right.
beginning of the talk and the end of the talk. They don't remember anything that you taught them. But what they do remember is, did you help them? And so I'll give you an example. One of my mentors, when I first started speaking, I spoke primarily to educators, And one of my mentors was a wonderful guy named Jim Trelease. He's no longer with us, but he used to teach parents how to read aloud to their children. And all of a sudden, in the middle of his talk, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to teach you something. This is going to save your life one day. If you ever lock yourself out of your car, as long as you have your cell phone, call your significant other, have them put the key next to your phone. You put your phone next to your car door, it'll unlock the car door." I've
Nah,
tried I've tried this from 3,000 miles away, JL. It works. It doesn't work with like
geez.
newer Tesla, but I had a Toyota Corolla and it worked. I actually tried it once. I was like, okay, this is the best part of this story. I'd watch him and people would come up to him after his presentation and say, "Oh my gosh, I got to tell you, I saw you a couple of years ago. I locked myself out of the car. I tried that. It worked. You are a lifesaver. I've been telling every school they got to book you as a speaker." Whoa. This has nothing to do with his presentation whatsoever, but what he did is he gave something to his audience that helped them. And that's all. I'm working right now with a woman. She deals with people with clinical depression, and she was speaking at a conference. I said, "Here's what you do. Tell everybody, take your pen, bite on the pen." So research shows that when you bite down on a pen, it actually triggers your brain to think that you're smiling, and it actually produces the same number of endorphins as if you actually were smiling. So if you're depressed all the time, I've just given you a little strategy on how to force your brain into happiness. It's just a little like when I'm talking to people about reading, when I do a reading presentation for parents, I'm like, "Hey, most people waste their time on social media on these phones. What I do is I set reminders on my phone. So like I'm always trying to learn different things. So I just read the book Dune, and they have a thing called the Litany Against Fear. So every day at 9:11, I have an alert that goes, "I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings to," and so I'm showing them things like that. So that's the content portion of your presentation is what can you do to really help your audience, because your audience, again, whether it's a keynote address or working with your board of directors or just working with your team, they've given you their most precious asset, their time. And I think you have a responsibility to help them, whether they decide to take the next step or not. You should be helpful. This is very important to me because I see a lot of people that are very manipulative on stage. And, I'm not
Mm.
saying it's not effective. I'm just saying I don't want, I'm a little bit different than a lot of so called coaches. Most people say, "Oh, you should share the most traumatizing experience of your life. That's how you're going to connect." I understand what they're saying, but there's three reasons why I refuse to do that. First of all, the world just survived a global pandemic. Everybody's had a lot of bad stuff happen to them. I don't think we need another sad story. I think we need more hopeful stories. Second of all, I'm teaching you how to deliver this again and again. I want you to have fun and be comfortable. Do you really want to talk about the worst moment of your life again and again? I mean, I have a friend whose daughter was killed in a school shooting. He's told that story over 1,000 times. You got to be a lot stronger than me to talk about the worst day of your life again and again. And third,
Yeah.
this is where people get angry with me, Jail. I have one objective when I'm on stage. I want to make sure that you leave feeling better than when you came in. I want you laughing, smiling, happy. I think there's something admirable about that as a basic objective. I believe the people that tell the same sad story again and again, by the 20th time they tell it, now those are crocodile tears. Now they're being manipulative. And I'm not saying it's not an effective sales strategy. It's actually a very effective sales strategy. But I personally don't want to have to take a shower after I get off stage because I just manipulated my audience. There are ethical ways to get people to want to do business with you. So that's a big mouthful about our process, but this is what we're taking our clients through on how to be more effective. Again, most of the people we work with, they're not. We do work with speakers, but usually we work with people that either don't like speaking or they're terrified of speaking. And so I want you to have fun. I want you to make this a fun experience, and I want you to the same techniques that I could teach you to do at JL in front of a 3,000 people at a conference, but the same technique will work with your two kids, and they don't
Ah,
realize that you're doing it.
even better. I do love the plug for authenticity because I think people pick up on that, and I think it's important. But Danny, we do have to wrap up. I'm
Right.
curious if someone does need help with storytelling, with moving the needle by sharing their idea in a way that actually works. How can they reach out to you and connect?
Well, as a thank you to you, JL, for having to bear with me over talking, I wanted to give everybody a freebie. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, guide like a tour guide, freestoryguide.com, I'm going to give everybody their own complimentary well-crafted story blueprint. What this is the actual process that Coach Jimmy and I take our clients through to help you create your well-crafted story. What this does for you is it takes the guesswork out of what story should I use and where should I put it in my presentation. And what this means for you is you now have an actual system to convert your audience into actual clients. You can get that at freestoryguide.com. And again, JL, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate all that you do.
No problem. It was a really great time. I learned a lot. I may have some questions for you later as well because I do a lot of speaking myself. So I'm always looking for advice. For everyone else who made it all the way to the end with us, as I like to say, while you're down there leaving that 5-star review, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Where do you struggle with storytelling, with public speaking, and what help could you use? Maybe we can work something out. And then if you know anyone else who is struggling with public speaking or struggling to communicate their ideas and helping them land, share this episode with them, introduce them to Danny, and share the wealth. Danny, thank you again. Absolutely fantastic conversation. For everyone else, we'll see you next time on Breakthrough Innovation.